Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome to the October Council meeting. If I could please begin with the statement of acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting, and we pay our respects to their elders and to elders from other communities who may be here today. Item 3 in our agenda is apologies and requests for leave of absence. Is anybody requesting any leave? Councillor Quilty.
All right, so as some people may be aware, I'm intending to contest the upcoming state election as an upper house candidate. So at this stage, I'm planning to take leave from my role as councillor from around the 8th of November to the 25th of November, subject to fiddling at the edges perhaps, but that's the gist of it.
Councillor, thank you, Councillor Quilty. That's all we need for that at this stage. Do we need that in writing?
So I've got 8th of November to the
25th. 26th, 5th, 25th. Yep.
So those are the dates moving forward.
Yep. Just maybe back that up with some in writing would be great. Super. Thank you. Do we need a motion? No. Thank you. Oh, goodness me, I'm really loud. Thank you, councillors. Is there any other apologies or requests for leaves of absence? No. Thank you. Declarations under acts, regulations, codes or local laws? CEO? Any?
The council local law prohibits the use of audio, video, oh, gee, I've lost it. Sorry, Kevin. Sorry. You got a copy? I should know it off by heart now.
It's always the case.
Just making sure I say the correct thing as per the Act, but persons are reminded that Council's meeting procedure local law prohibits the use of audio, video or still image recording devices unless prior approval has been given by the chairperson or by council.
Thank you, CEO. Declarations by councillors of any conflicts of interest. Councillor Hall, you want to go first?
Okay, I have a conflict of interest in item 9.3 of the building report.
Councillors, I have a conflict with 9.2, which is the planning report, in which case I'll have to vacate the chair. Can I have someone nominate a councillor to step into chair, please?
Madam Mayor, in your absence, I'd like to nominate Councillor Bennett to take over the chair.
Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mildren. If there's any other nominations? No? Then it is over to Councillor Bennett at that time. Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett, for taking the chair. Item 6 is confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett, any comment? Councillor Watson, other councillors? Motion is before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 7, there is 2 tonight, both of which are mine, are delegates' reports. Item 7.1 is Women in Local Government Leadership Summit, and the recommendation is there on page 8. Councillors, if you'll indulge me, I would like to move it, given that I was the intendee and will also speak to this report. Can I have someone second that, please? Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Councillors, if you'll just bear with me, this was a leadership summit that I was actually asked to attend, and in fact I made the opening keynote speech at this conference. It was centred around clearly what the title says, women in local government, but also leadership in general. So what did I bring home from it and what did I take from it? The challenges of gender equity, and we have a gender equity and an equity strategy that sit right across our organisation, but also how we look at our city as a whole and everything that we do. Some of the really great parts that, and I've discussed some of these with you already, but some of the really great things that we got to see and were showcased is some of the newest industry I guess, the newest industry opportunities within the frameworks of councils. So we saw Camberwell Bankstown and the way that they have structured their organisation, having a look at where councils in general are actually moving to, local government. So these attendees were from right around the nation. They also looked at growth versus fixed mindset in terms of not only from council laws but also the organisation and reshaping the way that council is doing business. So, for example, Camberwell Bankstown actually have a futures director. So that talks about the future of the city. Sitting underneath there are things like economic development, but really to challenge some of the norms about what has been done by local government in the past, but what should local government be looking at to really take our citizens and our cities into the future. There was also a lot of discussion in and around the space of the globalisation of information and business, and what does that mean for local government? So how does that impact our businesses that are in our own cities, but also how does that impact the business of council? So, councillors, I was really pleased to present at that summit, and I was very honoured to be asked to open the 2 days. And councillors, happy to share any further information and any of the case studies. In fact, I've passed a couple to the CEO, particularly around the Camberwell Bankstown, to go and have a look, because they have had through amalgamation, a huge change within their organisation, their structure, their culture, etc. So I think some really great learnings that through some of those connections that were made, we would certainly be able to learn some things from. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to make any comment or ask any questions? Councillor Bennett?
I just wanted to say, oh, that is loud. I just wanted to say it is pretty impressive that you were the keynote speaker of that conference. So congratulations. It's good to see that people even on a national level have noticed the work that you're doing. So well done.
No? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I did get a bit of a surprise because they did ring me and ask me if I'd be a keynote speaker, and then when I did get the schedule and saw as the opening, it did give me a little fright. But it was a real honour to do that, and it really was a broad section of both councillors but also CEOs from right across the nation. So from Adelaide, from Sydney, Brisbane, I think there was even a couple as far away from Perth that were there. And it was a really great collection of minds to discuss the whole sector. So it was a fantastic opportunity. So thank you to each and every one of you for your support also in attending that. Councillors, the recommendation is there that we receive and note this. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. And unusually, item 7.2 is the Australian Regional Development Conference. And again, I attended this as a keynote speaker with the Mayor of Albury. So I would like to move this recommendation also. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillors, this was, as again the title says, about regional development, again right across the nation. Interestingly, it was held in Tweed Heads, and nothing was more stark than cross-border issues when you stand in the conference facility, look out the window. One side of the road heading out of town was New South Wales, and the other side of the road heading into town was Queensland. It was a very interesting discussion of who did the centre median. So it was a really interesting conversation to have, particularly in that location. It looked again at many of the leading practices, again around regions from across the nation. One of the opening speakers was a previous minister, Fiona Nash, who now has a regional role in the development of CSU. And some of the commentary that really stuck in my mind from her presentation was, when you look at our regions, we know we have so much to offer. In fact, many do, and as a previous regional minister, she certainly did, but made the comment and note that it makes it a very difficult challenge and an interesting one when we start talking about decentralisation, when the media that is put forward in our major cities, 80% of all the media around regions in our national cities, and quite frankly, everywhere, is negative about regional cities. And when we are talking about decentralisation, we know how great it is to live in our cities and our regions. But when the negative is reinforced, what does that do and what is the perception? So there was a lot of discussion in and around that. There was, again, some terrific presenters. And, you know, there was a lot of discussion around, you know, you can't have a successful nation when you ignore 40% of your population that sits in your regions. When 60%, 67% of all exports come from our regional areas in Australia. Again, you cannot ignore those components of your nation. And if we want to have a strong, successful and vibrant and sustainable nation into the future, then we need to shift some of our thinking in our other sectors of government. So again, I also took the opportunity to make connections and spent some time with the CEO and Mayor of Tweed Heads because of the cross-border issues that they also face. And we have talked and discussed with the Mayor of Albury as well, getting online and actually having some more collaboration in and around the solving of cross-border issues. So James McTavish, who is the Cross-Border Commissioner for New South Wales, also sits over Tweed, so it's very familiar. But there is some learnings that we could potentially do, work with Tweed and with Queanbeyan, the three largest cross-border towns being us, Queanbeyan, and then Tweed Heads and Coolangatta, to really get our heads around how we tackle these and actually how we solve them. So standing together, there's a lot of learnings, but also I think some great strength in, again, standing together with other like councils. So we made extra time during lunch times, break times, etc., to actually do that. There was also some fantastic presentations, and I've literally last week just received copies of all of them, around a bioresources hub in the Upper Hunter. So that was really looking at new ways and new technologies to generate power, but also how to look at what would potentially be an issue in getting rid of some byproduct is actually now turned into fuels. So there were some really fantastic learnings there of how it's turned small regional areas around, but how it offers real opportunity for the future. So again, councillors, I'll flick that email out to you so you can jump online and have a look at any of those presentations. And I think that I'll just leave it at that at the moment. And if there was any comments, thank you, seconded it. Councillor Lowe, did you want any comment? No?
I'll probably just add to that, and something that I thought you may have covered off in your summary of it, that I think you may have touched on it but didn't go into depth about it, but you and Mayor Mack from Albury were asked to present on our two cities and one community, which I think is a big feather in our cap for that collaboration that we have with them. It's obviously making inroads nationally, and just wanted to know what the feedback was about your talk there. From what I've heard, it went very well.
Thank you. Yes, that is what we presented on. And you're right, there has been a lot of discussion around the agreement that we have with Albury. First of all, the most common comment is, how on earth did you manage to do that? But really it is actually about asking, what does it mean? So Tweed were really interested in the agreement that we had, considering that their neighbour is about 5 times the size of them, but you know, and we talked about some of the synergies. They don't have to necessarily be the big stuff. Look for the things where you actually have a commonality. So we had a lot of discussion around that. They were very interested to understand what our agreement had in it, what it meant, and what we were doing, the actions out of it. And so we did the presentation more broadly to the people who turned up, broke it into forums. We're in one of those forums. But certainly there was a lot of questions around, so what's the strengths? Because even if it's not about cross-border, how do you strengthen potentially your own local government area when you have direct impact from your neighbouring council? So, you know, the likes of Warrnambool in Victoria is actually ringed by another council, but really that working collaboration isn't there. But what would it mean if it was? And so there was a lot of discussion around that, more broadly, not just about cross-border, but certainly about cross-border as well, because it adds another layer of complexity. Thank you. Councillors, yep.
Madam Mayor, I think since the days of Tommy Wren and Gough Whitlam making this a growth area, that what we've done with the two cities, one community, and you being recognised to go and speak with Kevin Mack at an event such as that, and plus getting a cross-border commissioner for the Victorian side, I think we're moving it ahead, and I think that's a great achievement that we've done that in such a short time, and it should be a congratulations to our community, because we want to be individual communities, but we want to be one big community when we lobby and things like that. So congratulations, and I think we are starting to make waves both at state government levels and federal government levels. So I think, yeah, I think since the days of that corporation era, we're finally getting some really sensible development.
Thank you for your comments. Actually, councillors, it is probably worthy of note. It's 2 days ago, it was 12 months to the day that we signed that agreement. Yeah, so councillors, the recommendation is there to receive and note I report. Councillors, all those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Okay, moving on to item 8.1. Those reports are tabled this evening, councillors. You will have those in front of you. Just going to find our first page with our recommendation. Recommendation is on page 10 of 28 of that insert. Councillors, the recommendation is there. There is 2 points. Can I please have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe.
I've got nothing to add there.
Yep, Councillor Quilty.
So, first of all, let me mention from it's now page 6. If you look at table 1, the transfer of contributions from the developer reserve and to the defined benefits call-up reserve, those are effectively budgeted items. They're things we don't spend the money on during the year, but at the end of the year we just move them to the reserves. So that explains that table. I notice that if you look at the table on page 7, the variances, the heavy lifting from this surplus comes from lower salary costs, lower insurance, lower waste, higher interest revenue. Yep. I'd suggest that a portion of that is due to over budgeting, not just staff funding efficiencies. However, that's an ongoing discussion. Okay. Now, we have $7 million, if you look at the figures, we have $7 million in capital projects being rolled over from last year to this year. So on the surface of it, that's an alarming figure. You would think that we are budgeting a lot for things that we aren't getting done. But having said that, 4.25 million of that is apparently for the High Street reconstruction, prepaid money and our matching contribution. So that will be spent this year. We got that paid ahead of time and we had to match it ahead of time. So that explains, I guess, a chunk of that. No, I'm explaining. Okay, so I don't really support reallocating, getting to the chunk of it, $750,000 of the surplus to building a new library. Although that's a motion that we passed at the previous council, I'm not really on board with the need for a new library. However, especially not that it's to make up a shortfall in state government funding. These projects are always sold with all the money coming from the state government or loads of money coming from the state government, but when the grants come back, it's not always the case, and the ratepayers have to pick up the difference. I'm also not particularly in favour of dropping the remaining money into next year's budget process, but I'll have more to say about that in the next item.
I just wanted to make some points about the library and how impressive our library is. So I learnt the other week that we're actually the 7th most visited library in Victoria. So that's pretty impressive, even though with all the metro councils, that our library is ranking that high. It's obviously really well received by our community. There's heaps of stats actually in the report that's coming up that highlights how many people are using our library. Actually, the first one here is service 1,450 visitors to Wodonga Library. So that's 145,000. So that's pretty epic for our library. It's certainly something that our community uses a lot of, and one of the challenges is how outdated the actual building is.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to start off with a congratulations to the CEO and the team. Every year we set the challenge about finding further savings, looking to find efficiencies, and certainly working within the budget and delivering things within budget. And to have the luxury of then coming out in front that allows us to look at other opportunities for our community, I think is something that the CEO and her team should be congratulated on. Looking at libraries, saying that libraries aren't important, etc. Literacy, you cannot underestimate the value of literacy for our community, nor can you underestimate the social value of not only being connected but having a place and a space to go. You go to our library any time of the day and it is absolutely packed. It's packed with every age group and every social demographic. It isn't about any one particular part of the community benefits the most. And 145,000 people means that for every man, woman, child that lives in our city, that's a visit, that's 3 visits a year. That's every man, woman and child visiting 3 times a year. I don't think we have another asset that actually has that same usage or that same interaction. You tack onto that when we look at that cultural precinct and 30+ thousand people visiting art space as well, what that does for our community, how it encourages every level and every sector of our community to be engaged in some sort of art and culture, being able to be connected. It speaks volumes when that space is booked out for more than 3 years in advance. We have a burgeoning and a growing community that isn't slowing down. And when we have the opportunity of securing state funds, it is never going to be fully paid for, never by the state government. And Councillor Quilty, should you get in, perhaps maybe we'll see a change in that, I'm sure. That, we can't and we will never expect that. That's why it is in the budget, and we are working hard all the time to secure that money. But to have a facility that takes our community into future generations to be able to provide access to knowledge, safe spaces, community spaces is something that I absolutely embrace. And unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in receiving an additional grant. It doesn't mean we stop. It doesn't mean we don't continue to go for it over the next 12 months as we finalise the scope of works around this building. You absolutely believe it. As soon as the day we received the letter, we didn't get that 750. We were already making appointments to start again. So we don't stop. Well, we need to be able to ensure that we have that budget there. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will have to spend that money. We may end up with another luxury of actually looking at the other things that we need to provide for our community. Councillors, back to Councillor Lowe, who moved this, unless there's other comments from other councillors. No, Councillor Lowe, over to you.
Probably just echo your thoughts, Madam Mayor and Councillor Bennett, on those stats. And I think it's probably a good reminder that A, we got $4 million funding for it, but B, that the 750,000 is to guarantee the project goes ahead, that we can keep it moving and keep the momentum going, but not giving up on doing the best for our community and going to chase some more funding for that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Councillors, recommendation is there. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Item 8.2 is the recommendation is on page 28 of that additional insert, councillors. It is the September 2018 quarterly financial report. Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Someone second. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Watson.
Not much to report. Just a question probably to Narelle, and I think it's picked up on table 5, but on page 22 of the report, cash held, there's a very large spike there, and I was just wondering what that might be made up of, but I think it's covered in the items that are on page 23. Oh, sorry.
Through you, Madam Mayor. We do have a fairly high cash balance at the moment, which is a result of a number of our large projects that have been carried across to the current year, in particular our rebuilding of our city heart with the NSRF funding. And September also would have had some cash coming in with our first rates instalment, which would have peaked that a little higher as well. So it is running a little bit higher than usual. We are budgeting for it to come back down to the more usual level around the $13 million mark by the end of the year as those large projects are completed.
All right. So first of all, I call attention to a couple of items here. The rates income is actually below projected income for the year, which is unusual, but I'll touch on that again when we get to the September financial figures. The other thing I wanted to look at was, and again, I asked the questions this morning, so now I'll tell you, the reallocated loan interest between interest and principal, $116,000, which is the bottom of page 18. It's a result of the particular loan we have, where we don't know how much of the payment will be principal and interest until the CPI figures come out. So that's what that's all about. All right, so now my screen's gone blank. So this brings me to what I touched on previously. The previous question was reallocating the surplus. The officer recommendation is that we roll it into the 1920 budget process. Now, I, for one, don't support that. I really want the councillors to decide how to spend this money or not spend it, not to have it presented to us as a done deal when the budget pops out next year, all tied up in new projects, waiting for our rubber stamp. For the record, I believe we should be committing all the available surplus funds to a capital reserve, which we could call that the Barranduda Fields Capital Reserve, or alternatively the shortfall and developer contributions in Leneva Barranduda Valley Reserve. But regardless, we need to stop frittering the money away on new small-scale spending and start putting spare funds aside for future capital obligations.
Excellent. Councillor Coody, I'm going to hold you to task a little bit. In fact, I'm actually quite offended because you may not do the work at budget time, but I sure as heck do. I go through every line and make sure that I actually understand what it is we're budgeting for. So I find it incredibly offensive when you talk about rubber stamping and you make comments like you do. When I look at these figures, again, I'm going to say it, we are in an absolutely fortunate position through hard work of previous councils and this council to make sure that every number is checked, and we do. We work through it, councillors, you know, we work through our budget line by line at budget time, and you certainly have every opportunity to ask any question. So it just astounds me that you can continue to make sweeping statements and throwaway lines that actually mean nothing. I am really pleased that we are tracking very much in accordance with our budget, and I look forward to each budget session when we do go through those items. In fact, where we're looking at that $7 million carryover, we did discuss it today, and we did discuss the fact that most of that is made up of a handful of very, very, very large capital projects, like the other end of High Street, like we're still finishing off putting the power lines under South Street, like the cricket hub, and the list goes on. And if you, councillors, if you need your memory refreshed, I'm sure Narelle would give us those again. So they are large, substantial projects, but it really is actually about timing and actually about getting those things right. So, you know, to rush them through because we've been waiting on things like, for example, with the cricket hub, we've been waiting to work with the peak bodies, Cricket Australia, Cricket New South Wales, Cricket Victoria, to make sure we get those facilities absolutely right. So when we spend ratepayers' money, we're doing it really well. And for me, I would rather wait and do that than just do it just because you want to meet a time frame. I don't think that's good enough, councillor. So for me, I look at those and again, thank you, CEO, to you and the team. Narelle, I know you've worked very hard to get these reports up to us. Councillor Watson, to you to close.
Oh, thanks, Madam Mayor. And just probably to reinforce what we do here as councillors and strategic planning, things like that. With the budget process, we have planning days, and I would imagine that Patience is now getting her teams and business units together to get figures ready for the next planning and budget process. So, it's in our hands, Councillor Quilty, to be able to put forward what we want as a city of where we want to take it on these planning days and budget process, which is all accountable and all transparent with the community when we take it out to the community. So, yeah, I'd back you up, and there is a lot of hard work that's done in the business units to get these budgets out and these projects out.
Thank you. Councillors, the motion is there on page 28. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 8.3 is design and construction of lift replacement and new internal lift at council offices. Councillors, the motion is there on page 28 of 95, not the same page 28, the one actually in your report. Can I have someone? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Watson.
Madam Mayor, I think this will just bring this building and this asset into the new era for people with disability to be able to get about our building and probably add value to our building in the future, because if we need to ever sell it, I'm not saying we're doing that, but if we ever go to sell it or have an asset that we want to move, there is a lift that's going to be capable of using for the whole of the building. So the two lifts will be a great asset to this building.
One of the first things that surprised me when I first became a councillor and first went up to the old council chambers upstairs, that there was no lift access for members of our community that face their certain challenges. And that was just to come to a council meeting. And then there's probably also having staff within the building that may or may not have challenges getting up and down stairs as well. So, but basically what it does is not only give access for our community to move around in the building, but also now gives us the ability to hire staff that can move around quite easily, and that they're not limited into where they can go in the building. So I think it's much more than just creating better movement for the community, but also the staff within the building and making it a workplace of choice. Thank you.
All right, I'd suggest you get prepared for some more sweeping statements and throwaway lines. So, the new office fit-out plan calls for 2 new lifts to replace the one that we currently have. Why do we need 2 lifts, you might well ask. I might well ask. But apparently that's not a question council staff needed to address. No, that's not a question, Madam Mayor. Yes, the new design may be more convenient. And hey, when you have unlimited supply of ratepayers' money to spend, why not? What we're going to go out and do is put in 2 lifts with all the capital costs and all the repair costs in a building where we've got by for years and years with only one, just because it suits some people. Well, Milton Friedman famously described the 4 ways you can spend money. You can spend your own money on yourself, which means you get value for money. You can spend your own money on somebody else, in which case you're probably looking for the cheapest option. You can spend someone else's money on yourself, in which case cost is no concern, you go for the best possible. And you can spend somebody else's money on somebody else, in which case you don't really care about the price or the quality. A lot of council spending falls into category 4, but I would say in this case it's category 3, ratepayers' money spent on council's benefit.
Councillor, I'm going to remind
So, we only have one tender. No doubt it is in fact top quality, and to be fair, it's important to have quality in lifts because cheap lifts are a bad idea. But I don't believe we needed 2 quality lifts. I think we could have, if we really cared about ratepayers' money, we would have come up with a design where we had a single lift. I do not support this motion.
Other councillors?
Can I please ask a clarifying question to whoever through the CEO? Can you give a bit of explanation about needing 2 lifts, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. 2 lifts, there's an existing lift core that services the whole building. That internal lift will be replaced, and there's a second lift core which will provide disability access to the front of the building and the offices of NECMA, which will not go to the rest of the building. It's not possible to provide access to both sections from the same lift, so 2 lifts.
Great. So you're saying, just to summarise that, so for people with disabilities, they can access the whole building instead of just half the building?
That's correct.
So can I just ask, is it impossible to have come up with a design that would have had a single lift accessing the whole building and therefore saving the costs?
Councillor Quilty, there's 2 major issues here that we've struggled with over many years. One of them is the age of this building. So maybe an option to look at a new building, like many councils have done, in making sure that they future-proof into future generations a building that accommodates staff safely, because security is an issue with lifts, but most importantly, that a building that provides our community with safe and clear access to all, to the services they come here to take advantage of. I guess in the context of being absolutely financially responsible, myself and my staff chose to go on a journey where we had a very serious look at what we could do to give our community great access, particularly those with disabilities, but to make sure our staff are safe in an environment where often as council they aren't, and do it in an incredibly affordable and achievable way in a budget where you and previous councils have required us to be absolutely diligent. So I cannot do anything other than really congratulate staff and certainly councillors, because there was some, with the previous council, there was some discussion around new buildings. Do we renovate this old building? And how do we ensure community access and staff being safe on a day-to-day basis? I'm absolutely confident with the product that we've offered up to the community, to our council and to my staff.
Can I just ask a clarifier, please, CEO? One would assume, and I'm making an assumption, that given if we were trying to put a lift that actually came from our car park all the way up through the building, we would have needed to redesign the whole, potentially the front of the building, and add additional building, add a new lift well, and I would have assumed that that would have been much more expensive than $400,000.
You're absolutely right, Madam Mayor, and John can certainly confirm this, but that would have taken, it was certainly very close to $1 million in some of our reviews of that process. It's not just about 2 lifts versus 1. It's about so many other structural things that this building enables us to do and disables us to do. And where I do agree with Councillor Quilty is sometimes it's very difficult to come up with a great option that is affordable, rather than, but certainly the product that councillors have been made aware of, that we are delivering to our community, is, I think, one of the best quality products, but at an affordable price within our budget going forward, particularly in the next 5 years. So,
councillors, if I could continue. One of the things, and I've been here now 13 years, and Councillor Lowe, I never forget when I first started here, that it absolutely astounded me. First of all, we never used to have a disability toilet. We do now that we've fixed this component of the building. But also, it's actually impossible to fit a gurney in. So if somebody was unfortunate to have an accident on any one of our upper floors, our staff are actually, and public, are unsafe. And we do not meet code. So it's actually not an option to replace at least one of them. And Councillor Lowe, you made some comments around people with disabilities. So unless you have some mobility, to actually come up that ramp is actually pretty difficult for some people who are who do have a disability and would like to be able to come into their council building. And, you know, I know that the CEO has worked very hard with the team to look at redesign and come in with costs. Would we all like it cheaper? Absolutely. But the reality is this building needs to be brought up to not only code but also to safe, secure and access for all. So thank you for this report, and I will be supporting it. Councillor Watson, I think you moved this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to probably bring it all together is that it is so important that we have a building that is available for accessible for people with a disability, both staff and both community members. We've made the decision as council to stay in this building, and the hard work of council staff to bring great new assets into the building, such as this chamber here tonight. And it is so important that we do these changes to bring it up to standard, accessibility standard, and also for the staff to get about. So we also have two business units with the North East Water and also council. So for security reasons, it's another good idea to have a separate lift for that reason as well. So I commend and congratulate all the staff bringing to us and more so to the community two great things to keep this building going for many more years to come without us investing huge dollars, millions of dollars in a new building altogether. So well done.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify, it's not North East Water, is it CMA? NECMA. Sorry. I'm thinking they've got a fancy new building down the road. It's water. Councillors, the recommendation is there on page 28. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 8.4 is the Municipal Fire Management Plan. And the recommendation is there on page 32. Can I have someone, thank you, Councillor Watson. Gee, that hand's going up quick today, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mildren, did you stick your hand up? Then Councillor Mildren. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Can I bring everyone's attention to the Municipal Emergency Management Plan? And the reason I bring this to attention, within that becomes the Municipal Fire Management Plan. So within that, we need to have this document. So I'd like to commend all the staff of the City of Wodonga, but also all the other agencies that have been involved to bring this plan together. I think we've been a role model to get a plan of this description, I believe, patients out to the community. I think a lot of other local government areas are looking at what we've done because we've done a good first draft, or the draft, and now we're putting it through tonight. So, yeah, I can only recommend it to, so I hope we don't have to use it very often, but it's there if we ever do have a major incident in our city.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is one of the most important plans that we can put together for our municipality, and it's put together from a working group of a wide array of experts and knowledgeable people and community members and on, the list of people that participate in putting a municipal fire management plan together. It's I'll say moderated by the CFA and their wealth of knowledge. It's moderated by the local community members and the volunteers in the CFA input through their wealth of local knowledge, and it's effectively moderated by council's knowledge, the staff, and by a range of other state government authorities and other groups that, or various authorities such as catchment management authorities and so on. it's not something that's put together lightly, and it's got a lot of, I'll call it enforceability, that creates a situation where collectively we work for the good of the community. We work to make the job of the volunteers as easy as possible in the event that we have a fire, large or small. And it's just one of the most important across the board components of our community planning. And that's the reason why we have to have it, and it's the reason why I support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. It's important for the council to have an extensive fire management plan. It sets out how regional authorities, local government, fire agencies and all other relevant organisations can work together and respond effectively to any fire activity that can develop in our municipal area. This plan also aligns us with the Hume Regional Strategic Fire Management Plan. I'm very supportive of having a current plan, updated fire management plan, and especially so since we adopted the Hills Activation Strategy Plan last year, that is encouraging us to, well, more usage of the surrounding hills to its high level of activity. We have seen some very high risk bushfire within our city boundaries, especially around our hills. The loss of property, lives and our endangered flora and fauna are the utmost importance to keep safe and protected. As a council, we have a responsibility to our community to comply and act on recommendations from the Victoria Bushfires Royal Commission and Country Fire Act. This management plan aims to do this, so I'll be fully supportive. It's probably one of, it's a very important document. I've been always probably at council for a extensive fire plan, and this aims to address that. So, yep, I'll be supporting it.
Probably everyone's expressed their views, and I echo those views on the management plan itself. But I just wanted to thank Councillor Watson for his time. I know there's a lot of meetings that you have to attend to come up with a plan like this, and there's people don't understand what sort of role a councillor has, and a lot of it is attending different meetings after hours and different things on behalf of not only council laws but the community itself. So I thank you, Councillor Watson.
Can I just make a note, councillors, because this is actually based off a former plan that spanned from 2014 to 2017, and legislatively, absolutely correct, we have one, and you're spot on, this is so important, but it needs to be updated regularly because of changes to legislation, pick up any new parts of the acts that are coming out. But we have been unfortunate to have a few incidents in the last few years, and, touch wood, they haven't seen loss of life or huge damage to property. Well, there has been some, but it really, you see this thing come into its own when you see all the services step up and protect our wider community. And you're absolutely right, we need to keep our eyes on it, keep it updated, and there is a huge amount of comprehensive work that goes into it, and it takes not just one agency, it takes everyone sitting down at the table working together. So thank you. Can you pass on back through you, CEO, back to those working groups, our thanks for the great work that's been done. That is the CFA and all the other groups that do sit in behind it, including parts of your team that actually, in the Paul Leddy, who has been fantastic. I've worked with Paul on several occasions and he is incredibly knowledgeable. So thank you for such a good document. I think it has been improved and refined even further. So, councillors, I too will be supporting this document. Councillor Watson, to you for any close.
Just to acknowledge that Mark Wavarkin's in the audience, but also if he could pass on to Paul that our sincere thanks of all the hard work that they've done. And Councillor, I appreciate your kind thoughts, but it's basically all the referring authorities that do the hard work.
Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.5, Albury Wodonga Destination Management Plan 2019 to 2023. Whoa. I'll still be 40 in 2023. Councillors, can I have someone move this? Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Bennett.
So we had some experts come in and oversee this, which I think was really good when they delivered the presentation to us. I think it was really good to have someone, or two people actually, who do this kind of work elsewhere, so they were able to compare us to other places, and that's always really insightful. And you can see they went through a very detailed process on page 35 about coming up with this. There's a bit of a focus here which maybe is a bit different to traditionally. Maybe traditionally it was a bit more like, you know, come to Albury Wodonga and then there's great places where you can leave and go out to, whereas this is more saying, no, actually come to Albury Wodonga and stay in Albury Wodonga. There's enough things happening here to warrant staying here, which was really good to hear. Some other interesting facts they talked about up at Cairns, and when you would think of Cairns, you would probably think of tourism. I'm sure tourism is one of its biggest industries. They were actually noting that the Cairns Visitor Information Centre, the actual bricks and mortar, has closed, which was interesting. They also did talk about that it's not like there's not need for the bricks and mortar, but they were saying it would have to be incorporated into other buildings. So you wouldn't be building a standalone visitor information centre. It would be great to say have it incorporated into maybe, you know, a library or junction or cafes, places where tourists would be going. Another really interesting point, they were talking about all the areas of tourism that are really growing, and one of the number one ones, which is something that I realise that I'm actually one of those people who do this, is health and wellness retreats. So there's huge amount of money in that. So we were looking at also how to incorporate more of that locally.
I'll just follow on from Councillor Bennett's words there on health and wellness. What the plan has done is identify industries that we can target and grow, and they identified the health and wellness for that industry as a whole, because the average spend, I think, was $357 per night per person. So what they were saying is it's a really good opportunity for a business to capitalise on that locally in Albury Wodonga. So any health and wellness places out there listening, I would start targeting that. But the key about this plan is it is that there's a plan and there's some actions going to be put in place so we can actually measure how this plan goes. Traditionally, Albury Wodonga has been a friends and family destination, the majority of the people visiting here. But now it's giving us real insight into what type of people are coming and how we can attract them. So, and like Councillor Bennett said, I think it's really good. This is where we do need to get outside consultants that experience different places in the world and figure out what the attractors are. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Broadly, I'd endorse everything that's been said to date, but there's a couple of things that I have little nagging doubts in the back of my mind. One of them is it's possible that this plan may well be over-promising and it'll be under-delivered. That may or may not be a problem, but it's just something that's a nagging doubt. And the other thing that is a nagging doubt is the places from where people are being considered as visitors coming to this destination. In the preparation of the documentation, it refers to people that I would consider to be part of the Albury Wodonga catchment in its ordinary functions, its economic functions, to be visitors, like people from the outer areas around the city, Keewal, wherever, that come here to do their routine shopping are, in this documentation, considered to be visitors to the destination. I think potentially there might be some issues with that. However, having said all those things, I think this is a pretty good document that establishes some baselines and establishes some opportunities that we can work from. And I think we should try and get behind it and make it happen as best we can. Even though there's a few things in there that I think might result in under-delivery. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, we had the report that or the presentation that we had at council briefing was, I thought it was really informative and well done. And so there was a lot of information that I wasn't aware of. Councillor Bennett has mentioned some of the items that we discussed, but this plan aims to bring the two cities together as a tourist destination, which is a major plus. It will help to grow visitor numbers, hopefully, and showcase what we have to offer as two cities, to bring people coming here as visitors an overall experience. We have so much potential as a combined destination, and having a strategic plan going forward will just give us a good direction to act upon going forward. I look forward to the community's feedback when this goes out for public exhibition, and we can just people could add to it with their views, and look forward to coming up with a comprehensive document. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I just hope this gives confidence to a lot of our investors that Albury Wodonga, particularly Wodonga in this case, it's a destination place. I look at Bean Station, it was just a buzz at the weekend on Sunday morning when I was there. And those sorts of assets that we have in our city, and hopefully we build more on that. But if you go and look for a cup of coffee on a late afternoon, a lot of our coffee shops are shutting. So I hope this gives investors and local businesses the security and the confidence to stay open a bit longer and serve our community that are coming to our great city.
Councillors, I think it's a great report, and for me it does a couple of things. It actually helps my thinking, particularly as we move towards our planning day and we look at the what's next and we look at our vision and our focus for our city into the future. It might aim high, but I'd rather aim high than aim low. And if we miss the top target, well, at least we've actually overachieved if we're only aiming low. And then I guess it really also strengthens that notion of the two cities, one community, and what happens when we do work together and we work in partnership, and the strength that can be garnered from that, and the increase in opportunities that it provides, not only to our greater community, but also to our businesses, and then the new opportunities that it might open up. So I'm really looking forward to actually some sector feedback. So I'm really keen that we also encourage our sectors, so whether it be our motels, whether it be our restaurants, etc., to have a look at this document and give us some constructive feedback, because if there's anything missed, I'd love to know what that is, and how either we improve the document or any ideas that might flow from it. So I think it's a great trampoline to bounce from, to be able to actually look into our future, into a segment that we haven't really understood or tackled very well in the past, and we haven't done that for a whole host of reasons, and good reasons. But I think that we're sitting on that precipice of having a new sector, a new opportunity that we haven't really had before. So I think it is incredibly exciting, and I'm looking forward to that feedback, Councillor Hall, just like you. Councillors, back to Councillor Bennett for close.
Just a quick question, maybe through Officer Mudra. Just wondering, when this document goes out for public comment, where can it be found?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Our usual places, our website, it will be on platform 3690, all our social media channels, and also through our library, council offices. So we'll try and get it out to as many places in as many forms as we can.
Thank you, councillors. Motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.1 is the Finance Report for September. Can I have someone move it, please? Thank you, Councillor Quilty. Thank you, Councillor Lowe.
All right, so first, let me say I'm pleased to see a downward revision in the rates income. So actually a negative thing there. It might sound odd that I'm pleased that our income is less than projected, but let me explain. When we have a truly unbiased budget forecast, you would expect to see as many over projections as overstatements as understatements. When your budget is in a situation where you continuously turn over surpluses over projections, there must be a systemic bias in the process. So we overstate things in the budget and produce surpluses year after year. So seeing a downward revision in rate income is really a positive sign in my eyes. It means that we are getting more accurate. And accurate projections are important for working out what we should do and how we should raise rates to fund it. Of course, the net result was still a large surplus, so there's probably more work to be done there, but that's a plus. So I wanted to draw people's attention to the graph on page 46. In particular, the revised budget tracks along as expected until it gets to December, and then suddenly it spikes up. Now, if you try and draw a straight line, you end up with two straight lines with a kink at December. So my first instinct on seeing that is there is something wrong with the data, but having raised a question this morning in the briefing, Narelle has provided a possible explanation, and that is in December is a kick-off point for the High Street works, so, and including the money that we rebudgeted from last year into this year, so that does cause the accelerator to jump. Although I will then direct a question to Narelle in that we also had High Street works in this year's budget, and I don't see a jump up like that. Sorry, in the prior year's budget, prior year's spending. I don't see a jump up in those figures, so can you explain the discrepancy there, if that makes sense?
Through you, Madam Mayor. In relation to the projects that are in the 2017-2018, the size of the project is not as large as the High Street South project that we'll be undertaking in 2018-19. So it's one of the larger components of that 4-year NSRF funded CBA rebuild. So it was broken up into a number of projects over the last 4 years. This is the biggest project of all.
No, I actually had a similar question to Councillor Quilty this morning, but just, yeah, that the works take off in January is probably just a correction there. It does show it on the graph in December, but the actual work start in January, and then obviously receiving the funds early and then getting all spent in the one go, which is through the choice of the business owners on the street. It really encouraged us to start the works after Christmas so they could have the Christmas trade. So thank you.
Councillors, I'd like to add that if you actually look at that kick-off, it isn't just about the High Street. You've actually also got later in next year, you've got the kick-off of the Library Cultural Precinct mid-year. You've got, so they'll be starting to have some spend. You've got detailed design to happen. You've also got the building of the cricket hub. And I'm sure there's other things that I've forgotten that are actually large. So that's why you see that real ramping up. And then the other component too is thinking about the rates forecasting. Councillor Quilty, you will remember, I'm sure, that there is actually a new reporting tool that's enabled better forecasting with far more accuracy because of the complexity around forecasting for rates and SUPs and growth and et cetera, and the very complex mechanisms that sit in behind that. With the new tool that our officers have, it's going to enable a much closer, I guess, budgeting process for that. So I knew that you wouldn't have forgotten that. Councillor Quilty, did you have anything to close? No. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.2, I have a conflict with, which means that Councillor Bennett will step into the chair. I'll just read what my conflict is. I have an indirect report by close association. My previous partner is listed in this report.
councillors. You've got the recommendation there on page 51. Do I have a mover? Councillor Quilty. Seconder, Councillor Watson. Councillor Quilty, any comments? Councillor Watson, any other comments from anyone else? Oh, great. Councillor Quilty, back to you for any comments? No? Cool. All those in favour? And the motion's carried.
Thanks for making that so swift, Councillor Bennett. Change your name to Speedy. Item 9.3, I know Councillor Hall has a conflict.
Yep, okay. I've got a conflict of interest. It's a direct interest. There's a building permit in the building report that is a permit lodged by mine and my husband's business that I'm a partner in, and
Great. 9.3, building report for September 2018. The recommendation is there on page 57. Can I have a mover? Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Thanks, Councillor Quilty. Councillor Lowe.
Just pointing a fact out more than anything, it surprised me that our building permit numbers probably just continue to track above previous years on a consistent basis, which is a good indication that we are continuing to grow as a council. Thank you.
No, nothing to close. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.4, Council Hall. We've moved on to Competitive Services Report for September. The recommendation is there on page 59. Can I have someone move that? Thanks, Councillor Watson. Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson.
Madam, just to highlight the contract awarded to local suppliers, it's still up there. I think it's the second highest over the 12-month period. So it's really pleasing to see that the locals are getting a good showing.
Just Councillor Watson has prompted me, and it's actually in the next report, but talking about local contractors, this space here was built by 100% local contractors, which is good to note. A comment on the competitive services report. There's actually quite a lot of projects in here around physical activity. So there's lots of things around organised physical activity, like there is Kelly Park netball courts, Latrobe soccer fields, Auskick, but there's also stuff around incidental physical activity. So lots of things around paths, pedestrians, and cycle paths. So great to see such a council taking a leading role in encouraging our people to be active.
Councillor Watson, anything for close? No. Councillor's motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.5 is the annual report for 2017-2018. Who would like to move that for me? Councillor Watson, seconder. Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's a document that we've got to submit to the local government minister for ratification, but it's also a great report card for what we've done in our city for the 12 months and where we're sort of heading. And some of the things that come to mind is what our volunteers do in our city, and we have 349 registered volunteers in our city that have done 15,000 hours of service at all different types of events. So I think that shows really great strength of our community pulling together as a great healthy community and wanting to help build this Wodonga community. It also has some great projects we're continuing to do, and finishing off is the council chambers. The House Creek Bridge was completed. Kelly Park netball courts were finished. Pedestrian path, solar lights are continuing to go, but very important for people at night to walk in safety and trying to keep Wodonga a healthy city. And the High Street, South Street, or the northern end, and the Bond Street, which is now Jack Hall Way, was completed. So we've done some really great things, and I don't think we should finish here, and in the sense that our next planning day and our next budgeting process, we should be looking at some big projects to take us into the future.
Thank you. Just wanted to start with a question. Officer Klein, on page 15, we've got the "Where do your rates go" infographic. So this goes out into people's rates notice. And what other information goes out for people's rates notice?
So, through you, Madam Mayor, this year there was an actual DL-shaped booklet that went out in the rates notice that had a lot of information in relation to the waste charges, as well as the where your money goes, and information regarding people's choices around and options regarding the valuations of their properties.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight a couple of examples here. I talked about how many people visit the library. We've also got the Cube across the road. So that has a bit over nearly 91,000 guests a year. So that space over there has that many people visit it, which is pretty impressive. Another thing that I was really proud of that council did was our Reflect Respect campaign. So that was funding from maybe Vic Health Department, somewhere, but not us. And that was really fantastic work around council addressing issues around family violence. And I still get lots of comments about that for people, and we're doing some work now around how it can be translated into schools using that resource. So that's really exciting. I think it engaged a group of people that weren't really engaged with what was happening with council. So that was really innovative way of tackling that. And another one I just wanted to touch on was on page 91, there's just an error. We talk about the meetings that we've all attended. So there's an error with what I've attended. So it says that I missed an ordinary meeting and I went to all the special meetings, but in fact, it was one of the special meetings that I missed, and I've been to all the ordinary meetings. So we're going to, the electronic copy of this, we're going to rectify that, but I just wanted to have that one noted. That special meeting, we had about a week's notice for that. It was really sort of at the last minute, and I already had an overseas trip planned, so that's why I missed that one. And I also just wanted to make one final comment. On page 94, it talks about details of council or expenses. So in relation to the PD and the travel, so it's really hard because lots of the PD that we attend is in Melbourne or is somewhere else. That's just the perils of being, living a bit of a distance away from Melbourne. So we've been proactive on that. We've talked about this for a while, but it's actually happening. We're bringing the MAV, which is lots of the training that we go to, we're bringing them here to do training. So that'll be fantastic for us because it will minimise our travel expenses, but also our time as well. And we'll invite the surrounding councillors. So that'll be a good experience.
Okay, yes, with the what Councillor Bennett just mentioned about the meetings, it's got a listing of all the councillors. I think we've done pretty well. I think you consider there's not many council meetings that any of us have missed, so I think that's a good achievement as a council overall. This is a good, it's a great document, that. I was quite impressed with reading it, and I think well done to everyone that put it together. It's a pretty comprehensive snapshot, that's a hard word, to put together of the last financial year. It's got lots of, it covers a vast array of many different things our council does, such as our services, projects, financials, council's achievements, and, costs, many informative information at a glance. So it's very easy to just open it up and read it. It's well compiled report, and I hope many in the community take the opportunity to get a copy and get themselves informed and read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too think this is a pretty well presented document, and I think it's credit to what we've been able to achieve and the way the document's structured and all the rest of it's really well done. So I think staff have done a good job there. If there was anything I'd say probably would have been nice to see a draft before it got printed and put to bed, but timing and things, I guess. I too basically acknowledge what the Mayor's acknowledged in a message about the foresight of previous councils. I think it would be accurate to say that the vast majority of things that are being delivered at the moment are things that have been decided upon by the previous council. I'm not saying everything, but particularly some of the larger projects. I'd like to think that we can have a legacy that rolls into the next council in a similar manner. I guess we just have to wait and see about all that. But otherwise, this report, I think, is a fairly accurate reflection of the year. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, so I'll leave the praise of the beautiful layout and the well-formatted document and content to others because I don't want to ruin my Grinch image. So I'll echo Ron's thing that this was only available to councillors on Wednesday after it had come back from the printers. I think ideally we would have had a draft or an online copy before that because we had a lot of stuff to get through this week, as we do frequently. We might have picked up any errors in the document if we'd had a draft before it went to the printers. All right, to cut to the chase, on page 94, where we have the 93-94, we have the councillor expenses. This is the first year we've reported on them individually. No? Incorrect?
I think it's the fourth year we've reported on that, Councillor Quilty and councillors, but we'll double check that.
All right. Well, first or fourth. I think in general it's a good breakdown of the way to do it. And I think having external scrutiny probably applies a break to people's spending. So overall, I think that's been a good thing. I know we haven't included expenses like councillor coffee and councillor lunches that we have occasionally. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm in favour of that. My brain works better on a Monday morning with a coffee, but they are expenses and I feel they should have been picked up somewhere. My big issue... They are? Yep.
Yeah, so those costs are captured in the governance budget. So there's food and drinks are available as part of that governance budget, and that's where those costs will be. So if you want a breakdown of those, what's been spent, we can certainly provide that information.
I don't know how much, it depends how much effort it is to tease that out. But anyway, potentially there was a little more expense involved there. My big issue with this was the IT cost, which I work out as about $325 a month. So my first thought when I saw that was that we have the same internet plan as Assistant Treasurer Robert Stewart. We have iPads, iPhones and limited data, and I'm not entirely convinced we're getting value for money, the ratepayers are getting value for money here. However, that's something we'll take up further. Having said all that, if your councillor expenses were included on this page of where do your rates go, it would be a couple of cents down the bottom, I think. So overall, it's not huge amounts of money.
No, I'd probably just echo Councillor Hall's and most of the rest of the team's comments about this being a good synopsis of what we've achieved and what we've done over the past 12 months. And I urge members of the community to get yourself a copy or jump onto the online copy. And it's a really good breakdown of what we do, where we go, and who we serve in our community. So I won't touch on anything else because it doesn't need to be touched on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, some good comments, and Councillor Hall, I reckon you're spot on. If somebody wanted to pick this up, it's really readable. To have the highlights and the challenges right up front where somebody could read those, they're really easy to understand. It isn't just boring figures tucked in the back with an auditor's report, and while that's absolutely important, and that's there too, for our community at large, it actually really does explain so many things about the business of their council. And I think that it's really important, and through you, CEO, to the whole team, congratulations, because these layouts do take time, but, you know, the more that we can keep improving them each year means that the more opportunity all of our people get to have a look at all of the information. So I think that that's there. And I think, you know what, it really just, looking at it and re-looking at it again over the weekend is, you know, wow, what a year. What a year. We continue to grow. We continue to see private sector investment. We continue to deliver for our community. We continue to make sure that we fulfil the promises that we stood up for through our community plan. They are very there. They're very evident what we've achieved, where we're up to. And quite frankly, I don't think our city's ever looked better. So I think that each of us should take great pride in that, and I certainly do. And I think this document absolutely reflects where we're at as a city, and I just can't wait, because I think it is absolutely exciting. And Councillor Mildred, your comments about, you know, what's the legacy and what's going forward, and how do we keep planning to continue to move our city forward in such a optimistic and progressive way, I think is pretty exciting. So, CEO, congratulations to you and your team. I think it's an exceptional document. Councillor Watson, back to you for any close.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm really enlightened, because I think we're going to have a great planning day next year now, with some of the comments around the table that we want to put a legacy there, because we've got 2 years to go to plan some things and do some planning to take us into the future. But the second point I'd like to make, Madam Mayor, is that I had some visitors from Sydney, North Shore, Sydney, come, and they were so impressed with our city and our region. So I think that's just another endorsement that what we do during our term in local government and what we do on a daily and weekly basis is showing dividends in our city. So well done to our executive, to our workers, to our council, but also to our community, because, as I mentioned earlier, it's our volunteers and our community members that make this a great city.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Good words. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 9.6 is the Audit Committee Meeting September 12, 2018, the summary of minutes. Councillor Quilty, I'm guessing you want to move it, given you are our representative on it. Let's go have a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Quilty.
All right. You've got the summary of the minutes in here. I will try and keep my waffle down. So I note this 244-page report was provided to the Audit Committee members a couple of days before the meeting. So that involved quite a lot of sitting up into the early hours of the morning to get it all read, which is something that happens from time to time as councillors. I'd suggest there is a governance issue there if the Audit Committee don't have long enough time to review the documents. So we should strive to get that out earlier. I understand we were waiting for some documents to be finalised, but other parts of it could have been circulated earlier. So we'd like to take that. Hopefully that'll be taken on board. So the internal auditors presented the findings from the Events Management Review and the Emergency Management Review. There were no high-level risk ratings identified. Management accepted all the findings and placed them on the outstanding items register where necessary. I won't go into a couple of moderate ratings were identified in each report, but nothing significant. It's all taken on board. The scope of the upcoming cash security and proceeding process was presented. When council accepts cash, it'll be limited to cash in this building, not if there's anywhere else that we collect it, they're not going to look at that. It's probably only a minimal thing. The VAGO audit report was presented. and the financial reports. I believe there was some guarded praise for the Wodonga Council finance team. Auditors always give their praise only out in a guarded fashion, so let me put it on record that such praise was offered, in case everyone thinks I never have anything positive to say. Fair value recommendation paper, we review the roads, land under roads in 2017-18, and other assets in those other classes listed will be reviewed in 2019. Compliance checklist, finance and treasury reports presented. A review of the Community Development Directorate was presented to the Audit Committee. My takeaway from that was we need a affirmative action program to employ more men, apparently. And the Risk Management Quarterly Report and Outstanding Items Register. And items drop off the register, but new ones get added. So it seems to stay about the same.
Councillors, I'm going to take, does anybody wish to speak against receiving this report? Great, I'm going to put the motion. Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 10.1, Assemblies of Councillors. This report is for information only. I'm going to flick over it unless there is any questions. There, 10.2 is the Decisions Register. Again, that is for information only. Loving that new name. 11 notices of motion, there is none. 12 petitions, there is none. 13 council seal, none. 14 urgent business, none. 15 question time, there is a couple of questions. CEO.
Madam Mayor and councillors, we have two questions this evening that came in this afternoon. One of them was from Mary Ann Makur. Is Mary here tonight? Good evening, Mary. Thank you for your question. Pool fees. In 6.8 of the fees and charges in the contract with Aligned Leisure, it states, the councils will consider the implication of pricing policy on the usage and accessibility of the facilities to all elements of the community. Who from Wodonga Council Operations approved the higher fees, and were councillors aware of the proposed changes? As per process, Mary Ann will be getting you a letter in the next 5 working days to respond to your question. The second question comes from Michelle Cowan, who I know is here this evening. Thanks for your question, Michelle. Number 1, the environmental audit of Fell Timber Creek Nature Conservation Reserve has irrefutably identified that Parklands Albury Wodonga did not have appropriate planning approval to build any mountain bike trails. Yet Wodonga Council repeatedly and publicly asserted that a planning permit was not required. Will Wodonga Council advise how it intends to correct the misinformation Council has promulgated and hold Parklands Albury Wodonga to account for undertaking work without a permit? And number 2, given that the environmental audit of Fell Timber Creek Nature Conservation Reserve provides a comprehensive account of the area's significant biodiversity, including many threatened species, can Wodonga Council indicate what future planning controls will be put in place to protect this special area and publicly release the biodiversity assessment the Council undertook prior to building mountain bike trails and removing native vegetation from the adjoining land? Thank you, Michelle. As per process, we'll also be responding to your letter within 5 working days.
Okay, councillors, we have confidential business tonight, so that leaves me to close this section of the meeting. Can I ask that the gallery please feel free to join us? We won't be very long, I wouldn't imagine. We've got just a couple of items to deal with in confidence. If I could ask you to just adjourn next door, that would be great. Thank you very much. Thanks for returning with us after that brief pause. Can I just have someone please move the motion to return to open council? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I'm going to take it no one's going to speak against it. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion carried. Item 2 there on page 95 is the recommendation to adopt the in-camera recommendations. Take my glasses off. Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Quilty. No one's going to speak against that. Councillors, all those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. And that just leaves me to officially close tonight's meeting and encourage people to attend or tune in on 6 p.m. Monday, November 19th, 2018. Thank you, councillors. Thank you.